Get on the ground now. This is private property. Police Chief Gerald Hawkins' voice boomed across the manicured lawn as he drew his weapon, pointing it at Lydia Monroe, who stood calmly on the mansion's front steps, keys still in her hand. The afternoon sun glinted off his long-sleeved uniform as neighbors began gathering, phones already recording. "You don't belong here," he snarled, ignoring her attempts to explain, while backup sirens wailed in the distance. Lydia Monroe's red blazer and black slacks were pristine, professional, but Police Chief Gerald Hawkins saw only what his prejudice allowed him to see, a black woman where he believed none should be. The handcuffs clicked around her wrists as she remained composed, knowing that in less than an hour, his career would be over and her real identity would shock the entire state. Welcome to Frost Folk Tales. This is where we tell the stories of those who were underestimated, dismissed, and targeted, yet chose courage over silence. If these stories move you, subscribe and be part of a community that refuses to let them fade into the background. Lydia Monroe had been standing on those front steps for exactly 90 seconds when Police Chief Gerald Hawkins' patrol car screeched to a halt on Magnolia Drive. The pristine mansion behind her gleamed white in the afternoon sunlight, its colonial columns casting sharp shadows across the perfectly maintained lawn. She had just inserted her key into the front door lock, her mind focused on the security assessment she needed to complete before evening, when the aggressive shout shattered the peaceful suburban silence. "Officer, I can explain my presence here," Lydia said, her voice steady and professional as she slowly turned to face the approaching figure. Her red blazer caught the light, the fabric crisp and expensive, while her black slacks completed an ensemble that spoke of authority and competence. But Police Chief Gerald Hawkins wasn't interested in explanations. His face was flushed with anger, his hand already reaching for his service weapon as he strode across the manicured grass with purposeful aggression. "I said get on the ground," Gerald barked. His long-sleeved police uniform stretched tight across his stocky frame. 23 years on the force had taught him to make quick judgments, and every prejudice he harbored told him the same thing. This black woman had no legitimate reason to be at the Pemberton estate. The mansion was worth $3 million, situated in the most exclusive neighborhood in the city, and in his mind people like her simply didn't belong there. "Sir, if you will allow me to show you my identification," Lydia began. But her words were cut short by Gerald's increasingly hostile demands. She could see the crowd beginning to form across the street, curious neighbors emerging from their own palatial homes to witness the confrontation. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, creating an almost theatrical atmosphere as the drama unfolded on the mansion's front steps. Across Magnolia Drive, Darnell Washington stepped onto his front porch, immediately recognizing the signs of trouble. A tall man in his early 40s, wearing a green top and blue jacket. He had witnessed Police Chief Gerald Hawkins' aggressive tactics before. His phone was in his hand within seconds, camera rolling as he documented what was clearly becoming another example of discriminatory policing in their upscale neighborhood. The video quality was crystal clear in the bright daylight, capturing every word and gesture as the situation escalated. "You're trespassing on private property," Gerald continued, his voice rising with each word. "I don't care what kind of story you've cooked up or what fake identification you think you have." He gestured wildly with his free hand while keeping his weapon trained on Lydia, who remained remarkably calm despite the obvious threat. Her composure was almost unnatural, as if she possessed knowledge that Gerald couldn't fathom, some secret understanding that kept her anchored while chaos swirled around her. The sound of approaching sirens grew louder, and Detective Michelle Park's patrol car rounded the corner onto Magnolia Drive. She had responded immediately to Gerald's call for backup, though something about his tone over the radio had made her uneasy. Michelle was a 15-year veteran with a spotless record, wearing her regulation green top and blue jacket as she climbed out of her vehicle. The scene before her made her stomach tighten with concern. Her superior officer had his weapon drawn on an obviously professional black woman, who showed no signs of resistance or threat. "Chief, what's the situation here?" Michelle asked carefully, her training telling her to support her commanding officer, while her instincts screamed that something was terribly wrong. Lydia Monroe turned slightly to acknowledge the new arrival, and Michelle noticed immediately that this wasn't some random criminal. Everything about the woman suggested authority and competence, from her expensive clothing to her confident bearing despite being held at gunpoint. "Caught this one breaking into the Pemberton place," Gerald announced loudly, playing to the growing crowd of onlookers. "She was trying to unlock the front door when I arrived, probably casing the place or already stealing whatever she could carry." His words dripped with assumptions and prejudice, each accusation building on the last, as he constructed a narrative that fit his worldview rather than the evidence before his eyes. Mrs. Constance Hargrove emerged from the mansion next door, her red dress and pearl necklace marking her as one of the neighborhood's most prominent residents. At 72, she had appointed herself the unofficial guardian of Magnolia Drive's social order, and the sight of a black woman at the Pemberton estate filled her with righteous indignation. "That's right, officer," she called out in her sharp voice. "We've never seen her before in our lives. She definitely doesn't belong in this neighborhood. Ma'am, I need you to step back to the curb and place your hands behind your head," Gerald commanded, his authority absolute in his own mind. When Lydia complied with calm dignity, moving with the grace of someone accustomed to high-pressure situations, he should have recognized that her behavior was inconsistent with criminal activity. Instead, her composure only seemed to anger him further, as if her refusal to show fear was somehow an additional offense. "Officer," Lydia said once more, her voice cutting through the chaos with remarkable clarity, "I am here on official business. If you would simply verify my credentials through proper channels, this misunderstanding can be resolved immediately." She spoke with the confidence of someone who had dealt with security protocols and official procedures countless times before. But Gerald heard only what he expected to hear: excuses and lies from someone caught in criminal activity. Detective Michelle Park watched the interaction with growing alarm. Her research training kicked in automatically, and she began mentally cataloging inconsistencies in Gerald's version of events. The woman's clothing was expensive and professional. Her demeanor suggested authority rather than criminality. Most importantly, she had keys to the property and showed no signs of forced entry or burglary tools. Everything about the situation suggested that Gerald was making a catastrophic mistake, but challenging a superior officer required courage that Michelle wasn't sure she possessed. "Save your stories for the judge," Gerald sneered, producing his handcuffs with theatrical flourish. The metal gleamed in the afternoon sunlight as he approached Lydia, who extended her hands without resistance. Her compliance was complete, but there was something in her eyes, not fear or anger, but a kind of patient certainty that suggested she knew something Gerald did not. It was the look of someone who understood that justice was merely delayed, not denied. The handcuffs clicked shut around Lydia's wrists with a sound that seemed to echo across the pristine lawn. Gerald's satisfaction was obvious as he roughly guided her away from the mansion's front steps, but Lydia's dignity remained intact. She walked with her head high, her red blazer still immaculate, as if being arrested was merely an inconvenience rather than a crisis. Darnell Washington continued filming from across the street, his phone capturing every moment of the encounter in high definition. The afternoon lighting was perfect for video recording, and he knew instinctively that he was documenting something significant. Other neighbors had emerged from their homes now, some expressing approval for Gerald's actions, while others whispered among themselves with obvious discomfort at the scene unfolding before them. "You have the right to remain silent." Gerald began reciting Miranda rights with mechanical precision, though his tone suggested he viewed the legal formalities as mere obstacles to overcome. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The words carried additional irony that neither he nor the gathered crowd could yet understand. But Lydia Monroe listened with the patience of someone who had heard similar pronouncements many times before, usually from the other side of the badge. Detective Michelle Park made a decision that would later prove crucial to her career advancement. Despite her fear of challenging Gerald directly, she began discreetly photographing the scene and taking notes about the arrest procedures. Her police training had taught her to document everything thoroughly, and her instincts told her that this particular arrest would require extensive documentation before the day was over. The crowd continued to grow as word spread through the neighborhood's social networks. Some residents expressed support for Gerald's actions, applauding his vigilance in protecting their exclusive enclave from unwanted intruders. Others seemed troubled by the obvious disparity between the woman's professional appearance and the aggressive treatment she was receiving. The division in community response would later become a crucial element in the broader conversation about justice and accountability. As Gerald prepared to escort his prisoner to the patrol car, Lydia Monroe glanced once more at the mansion behind her. The afternoon sun illuminated its white columns and pristine facade, creating an almost ethereal backdrop for the drama that was unfolding. In a few hours, she would return to complete her security assessment, but under dramatically different circumstances. Gerald Hawkins would discover that his assumptions about who belonged in places of power and authority were not just wrong, but catastrophically, career-endingly wrong. The keys to the Pemberton estate remained on the ground where they had fallen, glinting in the sunlight like a clue, waiting to be discovered by someone wise enough to ask the right questions. The afternoon sun cast sharp shadows across the pristine sidewalk as Police Chief Gerald Hawkins tightened his grip on Lydia Monroe's arm. His long-sleeved uniform stretched taut across his broad shoulders. The handcuffs clinked softly against her wrists as he guided her toward his patrol car. But instead of maintaining the professional silence typically expected during an arrest, Gerald began what could only be described as a performance for the gathering crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," Gerald announced loudly, his voice carrying across the manicured lawns like a town crier delivering news. "What we have here is a textbook case of breaking and entering. This woman was caught red-handed, attempting to burglarize one of our community's finest homes." His chest puffed with self-importance as more neighbors emerged from their houses, drawn by the commotion like moths to flame. Lydia Monroe walked with measured steps, her red blazer pristine despite the ordeal, her black slacks unwrinkled. She said nothing, but her eyes moved methodically across the crowd, cataloging faces and reactions with the precision of someone trained to notice details others might miss. Her silence seemed to unnerve Gerald more than any protest might have. "Breaking and entering," Gerald repeated, raising his voice another octave. "Trespassing on private property." And when confronted by law enforcement, she resisted arrest. The lie rolled off his tongue with practiced ease, despite the fact that every witness present had observed Lydia's complete cooperation. From across the street, Darnell Washington adjusted his phone's angle, ensuring his recording captured both Gerald's theatrical pronouncements and Lydia's dignified composure. His brown fingers moved skillfully across the screen, already uploading segments to social media platforms where notifications were beginning to multiply at an alarming rate. "Resisted arrest?" whispered an elderly man in a blue jacket to his wife. "I didn't see any resistance. She's been calm as Sunday morning this whole time." But his wife shushed him quickly, glancing nervously toward Gerald, as if afraid their conversation might be overheard. The power dynamics of the neighborhood were clearly established, with Gerald Hawkins representing not just law enforcement, but the unspoken enforcement of social hierarchies that many residents preferred to keep undisturbed. The click of heels on pavement announced the approach of Mrs. Constance Hargrove, her red dress flowing dramatically as she walked, pearl necklace catching the sunlight like drops of captured moonlight. She had changed from her earlier attire, as if preparing for a social event rather than witnessing an arrest. Her smile was wide and approving as she approached Gerald, completely ignoring Lydia's presence. "Chief Hawkins," she gushed, her voice dripping with gratitude. "I cannot tell you how much we appreciate your quick response to this situation. It's so reassuring to know that someone is protecting our neighborhood from these criminals who think they can just waltz into our community and take whatever they please." Gerald preened under her praise, his chest expanding further. "Just doing my job, Mrs. Hargrove. We can't have people like this thinking they can infiltrate decent neighborhoods and prey on hardworking families. The audacity of attempting to break into the governor's safe house of all places." Lydia's eyebrow raised almost imperceptibly at this statement, the first crack in her composed facade. But she remained silent, though something flickered in her dark eyes that suggested Gerald's words held more significance than he realized. Detective Michelle Park arrived at that moment, her green top and blue jacket marking her as backup, though her expression suggested reluctance rather than enthusiasm for the situation. She approached slowly, her gaze moving between Gerald's animated face and Lydia's serene expression with growing concern. "Chief," Michelle said quietly, positioning herself slightly away from the crowd. "Perhaps we should verify this woman's identity before proceeding further." There might be some misunderstanding here. Gerald whipped around, his face flushing red with indignation. Misunderstanding? Detective Park, are you questioning my judgment? I caught this woman red-handed with keys to a property that doesn't belong to her. What more verification do you need? Michelle glanced at Lydia, noting the quality of her clothing, the professional way she carried herself despite being handcuffed, the complete absence of nervousness that typically accompanied guilty suspects. I'm just suggesting we follow proper protocol, Chief. Maybe run her identification through the system before we transport her. The only protocol I need is common sense, Gerald snapped, his voice loud enough for the entire crowd to hear. When someone doesn't belong somewhere and can't explain how they got keys to a secure government facility, that's called probable cause. Maybe you've forgotten your basic police training, Detective. The public rebuke caused Michelle to step back, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. Several neighbors exchanged uncomfortable glances, recognizing the inappropriate nature of Gerald's professional correction in front of civilians. But Gerald seemed oblivious to the breach of departmental etiquette, too caught up in his role as neighborhood protector to notice his subordinate's humiliation. Lydia Monroe finally spoke, her voice calm and measured. I'd like to make my phone call now, please. Gerald laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. Oh, you'll get your phone call. Don't worry about that. Right after we get you processed and booked at the station. Right after you're fingerprinted and photographed and officially entered into the system as the criminal you are. Sir, Lydia said, her tone remaining steady. I'm entitled to a phone call. It's a constitutional right. Constitutional rights. Gerald scoffed, opening the rear door of his patrol car with unnecessary force. You should have thought about your constitutional rights before you decided to break into someone else's property. You'll get your phone call when I decide you get your phone call. More neighbors had gathered now, forming a semicircle around the patrol car. Some held phones, recording the interaction, while others whispered among themselves. The crowd seemed divided, with some nodding approvingly at Gerald's tough stance, while others shifted uncomfortably, clearly troubled by what they were witnessing. An older woman in a blue jacket tugged on her husband's sleeve. Something doesn't feel right about this, Harold. That woman doesn't look like any burglar I've ever seen. But Harold shook his head, glancing toward Mrs. Hargrove's approving smile. Chief Hawkins knows what he's doing, Martha. If he says she's a criminal, then she's a criminal. We can't have people questioning our police force. Meanwhile, 3 blocks away, reporter Natalie Cruz was receiving a phone call from her assignment editor. The viral video had already been shared hundreds of times, and the local news station was dispatching a camera crew to cover what appeared to be developing into a significant story. Gerald continued his public address as he guided Lydia toward the patrol car. This is what happens when criminals think they can target our community. They think because we live in nice houses and drive nice cars, that we're easy marks. Well, I'm here to tell anyone watching that we don't tolerate criminal behavior in this neighborhood. What if she's not a criminal? The question came from a teenage girl standing with her mother, her young voice cutting through Gerald's rhetoric like a knife. Gerald's head snapped toward the girl, his expression darkening. Excuse me? The girl's mother quickly pulled her back, apologizing profusely. But the question hung in the air like smoke that couldn't be dispersed. Several other neighbors began looking at each other with questioning expressions. The seed of doubt planted by an innocent inquiry. Detective Michelle Park seized the moment. Chief, it would only take 5 minutes to run her identification. Standard procedure for any arrest involving government property. But Gerald was beyond reason now. His authority challenged too many times, in too short a period. Detective Park, if you can't support your commanding officer's decisions, perhaps you need to reconsider your career in law enforcement. This woman is going to the station, she's going to be booked, and she's going to face the full consequences of her criminal actions. As he spoke, Gerald's radio crackled with incoming calls, dispatch attempting to reach him with what sounded like urgent messages. But he was too focused on his performance, too invested in proving his point to the crowd, to pay attention to the increasingly frantic attempts at communication. Lydia Monroe slid into the back seat of the patrol car with fluid grace, her movements suggesting familiarity with vehicles and security protocols that seemed incongruous with Gerald's narrative of criminal behavior. She positioned herself so she could see out the window, her eyes finding Darnell Washington's phone camera and holding the lens for just a moment, as if sending a message to unknown viewers. Mrs. Hargrove approached the car window, tapping on the glass with her manicured nails. "I hope you learned your lesson, young lady. This neighborhood isn't for people like you." But Lydia Monroe only smiled, expression so serene, and knowing that it sent an unexpected chill down Mrs. Hargrove's spine. It was the smile of someone who possessed information that others lacked, someone who understood the situation far better than anyone else present. Gerald slammed the rear door and walked around to the driver's seat, basking in the approving murmurs of some neighbors while remaining oblivious to the growing number of concerned whispers. His radio continued crackling with unanswered calls as he started the engine, preparing to transport his prisoner to what he believed would be her inevitable booking and processing. Detective Michelle Park stood alone on the sidewalk, watching the patrol car pull away while pulling out her own phone. Something about this entire situation felt catastrophically wrong, and her instincts were screaming warnings that her superior officer was too arrogant to hear. As the car disappeared around the corner, the crowd began to disperse, but the conversations continued. Social media notifications chimed constantly from multiple phones, and the story was spreading far beyond the boundaries of the upscale neighborhood, reaching audiences that Gerald Hawkins had never imagined might take interest in his afternoon arrest. The afternoon sun continued to shine down on the pristine street, but the shadows were growing longer, and change was coming, whether Gerald Hawkins was prepared for it or not. The patrol car door slammed shut with a metallic finality that echoed through the afternoon air. Gerald Hawkins adjusted his rearview mirror, catching sight of Lydia Monroe's composed face in the back seat. Her red blazer remained pristine despite the handcuffs, her posture straight and dignified even in captivity. The sight only fueled his irritation. Well, Gerald muttered, starting the engine with unnecessary force. "Now that we're away from all those bleeding hearts, why don't you tell me how you really got those keys?" Lydia remained silent, her dark eyes focused straight ahead through the wire mesh separating them. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, casting harsh shadows across Gerald's weathered face as he pulled away from the mansion's circular driveway. "Cat got your tongue," Gerald pressed, his voice dripping with condescension. "Come on now. I've been doing this for 23 years. I've seen every scam in the book. You think you're the first one to try the I belong here routine?" Behind them, Detective Michelle Park's patrol car maintained a respectful distance, her green top visible through the windshield as she gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles. Something about this entire situation felt wrong, but challenging Chief Hawkins directly would be career suicide. Instead, she reached for her mobile computer, balancing it against the steering wheel as she began typing with one hand. Gerald's radio crackled to life. "Unit 7, this is dispatch. We have multiple inquiries about your current arrest. Please respond." Gerald snatched the radio from its mount, his long-sleeved uniform stretching tight across his shoulders. "This is Chief Hawkins. What kind of inquiries?" "Sir, we've received calls from the mayor's office and the governor's security detail. They're asking about an incident at Willow Creek Mansion." Gerald's laugh was harsh and dismissive. "Tell them we've apprehended a trespasser and everything is under control. Probably just nosy politicians worried about property values." "Sir, they specifically mentioned the name Lydia Monroe and requested." "I don't care what they requested," Gerald snapped, cutting off the dispatcher. "I'm handling a criminal matter here. Chief Hawkins out." He slammed the radio back into its mount and caught Lydia's eye in the mirror again. "Hear that? Looks like your little stunt is causing quite a stir. Hope you enjoyed your 15 minutes of fame, because where you're going, the only spotlight you'll see is the one in interrogation." Lydia's voice was steady and professional when she finally spoke. "Chief Hawkins, I strongly advise you to verify my credentials before this situation escalates further." "Escalates?" Gerald's voice rose an octave. "Lady, you broke into a mansion in broad daylight. The only thing escalating here is your criminal charges. Breaking and entering, trespassing, resisting arrest, and now I'm thinking about adding attempted fraud to the mix. I have not resisted arrest in any way, and you know it. Don't tell me what I know." Gerald's knuckles turned white as he gripped the steering wheel. I know exactly what I'm dealing with here. Some welfare queen who got her hands on stolen keys, probably from whatever cleaning service she works for. Thought you'd hit the jackpot, didn't you? Nice big mansion, fancy neighborhood. Figured nobody would be watching. The dashcam mounted on the patrol car's dashboard continued its silent recording, capturing every word of Gerald's tirade. The afternoon sun created perfect lighting conditions, ensuring that both his facial expressions and voice would be clearly documented. Meanwhile, 3 miles away, Darnell Washington sat at his kitchen table, his laptop open as he watched the view counter on his social media post climb steadily. The video of Lydia's arrest had already reached 50,000 views and was gaining momentum. Comments poured in from outraged viewers, sharing the post across multiple platforms. "This is exactly why we need police reform," read one comment with hundreds of likes. "Look at how calm and professional she is, and he's treating her like a criminal. That woman's composure is incredible," added another. "She knows something we don't. Somebody needs to identify this police chief and hold him accountable." Darnell refreshed the page and watched the numbers jump again. 65,000 views. The story was spreading faster than he'd ever imagined possible. Across town, reporter Natalie Cruz was already in her car, racing toward the police station, with her camera crew following close behind. The assignment editor had caught wind of the viral video and recognized the potential for a major story. Her phone buzzed constantly with updates from her research team. "The mansion is registered to the state government." Her producer's voice crackled through the car's Bluetooth system. "It's listed as a secure facility, restricted access only." Which means either she had legitimate access, or this is the crime of the century, Natalie replied, pressing harder on the accelerator. "Either way, we need to be there when they bring her in." Back in the patrol car, Gerald continued his verbal assault, his prejudice becoming more blatant with each passing mile. "I bet you've got a record longer than my arm. Theft, fraud, probably drugs too. That's how it always goes with your type." "My type?" Lydia's voice remained controlled, but there was steel beneath the calm surface. "Don't play innocent with me. I've been cleaning up this city since before you were born. I know exactly what kind of person tries to con their way into places they don't belong." Detective Michelle Park, still following behind, had pulled up Lydia Monroe's name in the police database. What she found made her stomach drop. The woman in Gerald's back seat wasn't just some random trespasser. According to the federal law enforcement database, Lydia Monroe held multiple security clearances and had connections to state government. Michelle grabbed her radio. "Chief, this is Detective Park. I need to speak with you privately when we reach the station." "Whatever you have to say, you can say it now," Gerald replied curtly. "Sir, it's about the suspect's background check. There are some discrepancies that need your immediate attention. The only discrepancy here is between what she claims and reality." Gerald shot back. "Save your paperwork for the booking process." Michelle set down the radio with shaking hands. She'd tried to warn him, but Gerald's arrogance was creating a disaster that would engulf them all. At the governor's mansion, 12 miles away, the security monitoring center was buzzing with activity. The overnight threat assessment had triggered enhanced surveillance protocols, and the failure of their new security chief to check in was raising red flags throughout the system. Security Director James Patterson was on his 3rd cup of coffee when the alert came through. "Sir, we have a problem. Chief Monroe was scheduled to complete her inspection of Willow Creek by 1400 hours. She's not responding to calls or messages." Governor Arthur Pennington looked up from his briefing papers, his expression grave. "What's the last known location of her tracking device?" "Still showing at the Willow Creek facility, sir. But there's been unusual police activity in that area. Multiple units responded to a call." The governor's jaw tightened. Lydia Monroe was one of the most competent security professionals he'd ever worked with. If she wasn't responding, something was seriously wrong. Gerald's radio crackled again. "Chief Hawkins, this is Captain Langley. I need you to call me immediately upon your arrival at the station." Gerald rolled his eyes. "Looks like the brass is getting nervous. Probably worried about paperwork and liability." "Don't worry, I've got everything documented properly. You should listen to them," Lydia said quietly from the back seat. "The only thing I'm listening to is the sound of justice being served, Gerald replied. You picked the wrong neighborhood and the wrong cop to mess with today. As they approached the police station, Gerald could see the gathering crowd of reporters and protesters already assembling outside. News vans lined the street, their satellite dishes extended toward the sky like technological flowers reaching for the sun. Would you look at that circus? Gerald muttered, but there was satisfaction in his voice. Media loves a good arrest story. Too bad for you, they're about to see a criminal getting what she deserves. Lydia checked her watch again, the small gold timepiece catching the afternoon light, 4:30 p.m. Her scheduled check-in with the governor's security team was now 90 minutes overdue. By now, protocols would be in motion. The very machinery of state government would be mobilizing to locate their missing security chief. Gerald pulled into the station's rear entrance, away from the cameras but not beyond their telephoto lenses. End of the line, princess. Hope you enjoyed the ride, because your next trip is going to be in the back of a prison transport van. As he stepped out of the patrol car and opened the rear door, Gerald felt the familiar surge of satisfaction that came with a successful arrest. In his mind, he had protected an upscale neighborhood from criminal elements and demonstrated the effectiveness of proactive policing. He had no way of knowing that the woman he was preparing to escort into the station building held security clearances that exceeded his own chief's authority. He couldn't imagine that his dismissive treatment of radio calls had prevented him from learning information that could have saved his career. The dashcam continued recording as Gerald helped Lydia out of the patrol car, capturing her continued dignity and his growing arrogance. In a few hours, that footage would become evidence in a federal investigation. But for now, Gerald Hawkins remained blissfully unaware that he was walking directly into the biggest mistake of his professional life. Detective Michelle Park pulled up behind them, her research complete and her dread mounting. She knew exactly who Lydia Monroe was now, and she understood that they were all about to face consequences that would extend far beyond a simple arrest report. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the police station parking lot as Gerald escorted his prisoner toward the building, completely confident in his actions and utterly unprepared for the storm that was about to break over his head. The automatic doors of the Central District Police Station slid open with a mechanical hiss as Chief Gerald Hawkins pushed Lydia Monroe through the entrance, her handcuffs catching the harsh overhead fluorescent lighting that bathed the lobby in stark white brightness. The afternoon sun streamed through the building's skylights, creating an almost theatrical illumination as Gerald paraded his prisoner through the bustling station like a trophy hunter displaying his prize. "Look what we got here, boys," Gerald announced loudly to the room, his voice carrying across the open floor plan, where officers in various uniforms worked at their desks. "Caught this one red-handed breaking into the Elmwood mansion. These criminals think they can just waltz into our nice neighborhoods and help themselves to whatever they want." Detective Michelle Park, still wearing her green top and blue jacket from the arrest scene, followed closely behind, her laptop bag slung over her shoulder and her face etched with growing concern. She had spent the entire drive back running searches on her mobile computer, and what she had discovered made her stomach churn with dread. Officer James Rodriguez looked up from his desk, his short-sleeved uniform shirt crisp under the fluorescent lights. "Chief, did you verify her identity? She looks pretty calm for someone who just got caught burgling." Gerald's face reddened as he tightened his grip on Lydia's arm. "I don't need to verify anything, Rodriguez. I caught her in the act. She had keys, probably stolen them from some poor homeowner, or lifted them from a real estate office. These people are getting smarter about their methods." Lydia Monroe maintained her dignified posture despite the handcuffs, her red blazer and black slacks still immaculate even after the ordeal. She moved with quiet grace through the station, her dark eyes taking in every detail while her expression remained serene. When she caught Officer Rodriguez's eye, she nodded slightly, a gesture so subtle and professional that it made him pause mid-sentence. "Chief Hawkins," Michelle Park interjected, her voice carefully controlled but urgent. "I really think we should verify some information before we proceed with booking. I found some discrepancies that we need to discuss." Gerald whipped around to face his detective, his long-sleeved uniform stretching across his broad shoulders. "Park, I'm getting real tired of your second guessing. Are you questioning my judgment in front of the entire station? The room grew noticeably quieter as other officers stopped their conversations to listen. Sergeant David Kim, working at the front desk, exchanged a meaningful glance with Officer Sarah Chen, who was updating case files on her computer. The tension was palpable under the bright overhead lighting. I'm just suggesting we follow proper procedure, Michelle replied, clutching her laptop bag tighter. The property records show some unusual classifications that might be relevant to this case. Unusual classifications? Gerald scoffed, his voice echoing off the tiled floors and painted concrete walls. The only unusual thing here is a criminal thinking she can talk her way out of a felony charge. Now stop wasting time and help me get her processed. Lydia Monroe checked her watch, a subtle movement that somehow conveyed both patience and anticipation. The gesture was so confident, so assured, that Officer Rodriguez found himself studying her more carefully. There was something about her bearing, the way she carried herself even in handcuffs, that seemed entirely inconsistent with Gerald's accusations. The station's communication center buzzed with activity as calls came in from various sources. Dispatcher Maria Santos fielded inquiry after inquiry, her headset crackling with urgent voices from city officials, media outlets, and concerned citizens who had seen the viral video. Each call seemed to increase the nervous energy in the building. Chief, Sergeant Kim called from his desk, holding up his phone. I've got the mayor's office on line 3. They want to speak with you about an arrest at the Elmwood property. Gerald's jaw clenched as he continued marching Lydia toward the booking area. Tell them I'm busy processing a criminal. They can call back later. The automatic doors opened again, and Captain Richard Langley strode into the station with purposeful steps. His orange top and blue jacket were perfectly pressed, and his silver hair caught the fluorescent lights as he surveyed the scene with sharp eyes. At 62, he commanded respect through decades of experience and careful judgment, qualities that had earned him his current position overseeing multiple districts. Chief Hawkins, Captain Langley called out, his voice carrying authority that cut through the ambient noise of the station. I need to speak with you immediately about this arrest. Gerald's confident stride faltered for just a moment before he resumed his path toward booking. Captain, I'm in the middle of processing a suspect. Can this wait? No, it cannot wait, Captain Langley replied firmly, his polished shoes clicking against the tile floor as he approached. I've received multiple calls from city officials, and there are serious questions about the circumstances of this arrest. Other officers throughout the station had stopped pretending to work and were now openly watching the confrontation unfold. The bright lighting made every expression, every gesture clearly visible as the drama played out in the heart of their workplace. Lydia Monroe continued to observe everything with calm intelligence, occasionally glancing at her watch. Her composure under such circumstances was remarkable, as if she possessed knowledge that everyone else lacked. When Captain Langley looked at her, she met his gaze directly with quiet dignity. Ma'am, Captain Langley said respectfully, I'm Captain Langley. Are you injured? Have you been properly read your rights? Before Lydia could respond, Gerald stepped between them. Captain, with all due respect, she's my prisoner and my responsibility. I don't need interference in my investigation. Your investigation? Captain Langley's eyebrows rose. Chief, I'm not interfering. I'm following up on multiple official inquiries about an arrest at a government property. The mansion where you arrested this woman is not privately owned. A ripple of whispers spread through the station as officers processed this information. Michelle Park seized the moment to approach with her laptop open, the screen displaying property records that glowed under the fluorescent lights. Captain, that's what I've been trying to tell the chief, Michelle said, her voice gaining strength. The Elmwood property is listed as government-owned residential facility with restricted access classifications. It's not a private residence at all. Gerald's face flushed crimson as he realized the conversation was spiraling beyond his control. That's impossible. It's clearly a private mansion in an upscale neighborhood. I know that area like the back of my hand. Chief Hawkins, Lydia Monroe spoke for the first time since entering the station, her voice calm and professional. If you would allow me to make my phone call, as is my legal right, this entire situation could be resolved very quickly. You'll get your phone call when I say you get your phone call. Gerald snapped, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. The bright overhead lighting seemed to highlight every bead of sweat forming on his forehead. Captain Langley's expression grew increasingly stern. Chief, standard procedure requires that arrestees be allowed to make their phone call promptly. Why are you deviating from established protocols? Meanwhile, across the city, the wheels of justice were already turning. In the governor's mansion downtown, security coordinator Janet Walsh noticed unusual alerts on her monitoring system. The secure residence at Elmwood showed an active police presence that hadn't been cleared through proper channels. "Sir," Janet said, knocking on Governor Arthur Pennington's office door, "we have a situation at the Elmwood safe house. There's been police activity, and we can't locate Chief Monroe." Governor Pennington looked up from his desk, his dark suit impeccable under his office's natural lighting. What kind of police activity? Lydia was scheduled to complete her security assessment today at her downtown law office. Attorney Felicia Drummond reviewed the viral video footage for the third time, her red blouse bright under her desk lamp. The evidence was damning, a clear case of police misconduct that demanded immediate action. She began drafting emergency legal motions while her assistant contacted civil rights organizations. Back at the station, reporter Natalie Cruz was conducting interviews with neighbors and witnesses, her investigation revealing a pattern of discriminatory policing that extended far beyond this single incident. Her story was gaining national attention as social media amplified the outrage. Gerald Hawkins remained oblivious to these converging forces as he attempted to maintain control of the situation. "Captain, I appreciate your concern, but I have a job to do. This woman was found with keys to a property where she doesn't belong, and I'm going to process her according to the law." "Chief," Officer Rodriguez interjected hesitantly, "maybe we should just verify her identity before we go any further. Something about this doesn't feel right." Gerald whirled on the younger officer. "Rodriguez, when I want your opinion, I'll ask for it. Until then, keep your mouth shut and let experienced officers handle police work." Lydia Monroe checked her watch again, and this time her slight smile suggested that whatever she was waiting for was very close at hand. The fluorescent lights cast no shadows as she stood in the center of the storm, calm and dignified while chaos swirled around her. Captain Langley made a decision. "Chief Hawkins, I'm ordering you to allow this woman to make her phone call immediately. And Detective Park, I want to see those property records right now." The station held its collective breath as the confrontation reached a crucial moment. Outside, unknown to Gerald Hawkins, a convoy of black SUVs was racing through the city streets, emergency lights flashing as they approached the police station. The forces of justice were converging, and Chief Gerald Hawkins was about to discover just how catastrophically wrong his assumptions had been. The bright fluorescent lighting illuminated every face in the station as they waited to see who would blink first in this battle of wills, while Lydia Monroe continued her patient vigil, knowing that vindication was merely moments away. 20 miles across the city, Governor Arthur Pennington sat in his mahogany-paneled office, reviewing security briefings, when his phone buzzed with an encrypted message. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the tall windows as he read the alert from his security details monitoring system. Unusual police activity detected at Residence 7. His blood ran cold. Residence 7 was the secure safe house where his newly appointed security chief Lydia Monroe was conducting her first comprehensive threat assessment. She had been scheduled to complete the evaluation hours ago. Arthur Pennington immediately pressed the emergency contact button on his desk. Within seconds, his head of security, Agent Marcus Sullivan, appeared in the doorway wearing his standard black suit and earpiece. "Governor, we have a situation," Agent Sullivan announced, his muscular frame filling the doorframe. "Our monitoring systems show police vehicles at Residence 7. Chief Monroe's GPS tracker indicates she's been stationary there for over 3 hours." The governor's face darkened as he rose from his leather chair. "Get me Captain Langley at the precinct immediately and prep the convoy. We're going downtown." "Sir, we're already tracking social media chatter about an arrest at that address. There's video footage circulating," Agent Sullivan reported, his jaw clenched with barely contained anger. Arthur Pennington's hands trembled as he reached for his dark suit jacket. Lydia Monroe wasn't just his security chief. She was one of the most qualified protection specialists in the country, personally recruited from the FBI's elite security division. The thought of her being treated like a common criminal made his stomach churn. Meanwhile, at the police station, Captain Richard Langley paced behind his desk in his orange polo shirt and blue jacket, fielding increasingly urgent calls from city officials. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across his weathered face as he tried to piece together what had happened at the mansion. Detective Park, he called out as Michelle Park hurried past his office. Get in here, now. Michelle Park entered, her green blouse wrinkled from stress and her notepad clutched tightly in her hands. Captain, I've been trying to research the woman Chief Hawkins arrested, but something's not right about this whole situation. What do you mean not right? Captain Langley demanded, loosening his tie. The address where she was arrested, sir. It's not listed as a private residence. According to state records, it's classified as government property. And the woman Lydia Monroe, her background check is coming back with federal security clearances that require authorization I don't have. Captain Langley felt a cold dread settling in his chest. Where's Gerald now? Still in booking, sir. He's refusing to listen to anyone. When I tried to suggest we verify her identity through federal channels, he threatened to write me up for insubordination. The captain's phone rang, its shrill tone cutting through the tension. He grabbed it on the first ring. Captain Langley speaking. Captain, this is Governor Pennington's office. We need the immediate release of Lydia Monroe. She's conducting official state business and should not have been detained. Before Captain Langley could respond, Gerald Hawkins appeared in the doorway, his long-sleeved uniform stretched tight across his chest, sweat stains visible under the harsh fluorescent lighting. Who's that on the phone, Captain? Gerald demanded, snatching the receiver from his superior's hand. Listen here, whoever this is, your little prank isn't funny. We've got a real criminal in custody, and no amount of fake calls is going to change that. Gerald, wait, Captain Langley protested, but Gerald had already slammed the phone down. Some idiot, claiming to be from the governor's office. Gerald scoffed, wiping perspiration from his forehead. These criminals and their friends will try anything. But I've been doing this job for 15 years, and I know trouble when I see it. Detective Park stepped forward hesitantly. Chief Hawkins, sir, I really think we need to verify this woman's identity through proper channels. The federal database is showing security classifications that suggest she might actually be authorized to be at that location. Gerald's face flushed red with anger. Detective Park, I'm going to say this once and only once. You keep questioning my judgment, and you'll find yourself walking a beat in the worst part of town. This woman is a criminal, plain and simple. I caught her red-handed, and I'm not about to let some fancy computer databases or prank phone calls change the facts. Across the city, reporter Natalie Cruz was broadcasting live from outside the police station, her camera crew capturing the growing crowd of protesters and supporters gathering on the sidewalk. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows as she spoke into her microphone. This is Natalie Cruz, reporting live from downtown, where a controversial arrest this afternoon has sparked outrage across social media. The viral video shows what appears to be an unjustified arrest of a black woman at an upscale mansion, and sources are now suggesting the woman may have been conducting legitimate business at the property. Inside the station, Gerald Hawkins remained oblivious to the storm brewing around him. He continued filling out paperwork at his desk, occasionally glancing up at the holding area where Lydia Monroe sat with quiet dignity, her red blazer somehow still pristine despite hours of detention. Almost done with your paperwork, sweetheart, Gerald called out mockingly. Hope you enjoyed your little adventure in the mansion, because where you're going, the accommodations won't be nearly as nice. Lydia Monroe checked her watch for the dozenth time, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She had remained silent for hours, knowing that every moment of delay only made Gerald's inevitable downfall more spectacular. Her training had taught her patience, and her experience had taught her that justice, while sometimes slow, was ultimately inevitable. Detective Park tried one more time to intervene. Chief Hawkins, please, I'm begging you to just make one verification call. Something about this whole situation feels wrong. The only thing wrong here, Detective, is your inability to support your fellow officers, Gerald snapped, not looking up from his forms. Maybe you're not cut out for this job if you can't handle a simple arrest. At that moment, Agent Sullivan burst through the station's front doors, followed by 3 other agents in dark suits. Their muscular frames and professional demeanor immediately commanded attention from everyone in the lobby. The fluorescent lighting reflected off their earpieces as they approached the front desk. "We need to speak with whoever's in charge immediately," Agent Sullivan announced, his voice carrying the authority of federal law enforcement. The desk sergeant, a middle-aged man in an orange shirt and blue jacket, nervously pointed toward Captain Langley's office. "The captain's office is down that hall, sir." Meanwhile, Governor Arthur Pennington's convoy was racing through the city streets, 3 black SUVs with tinted windows and flashing lights cutting through traffic. Inside the lead vehicle, the governor was making urgent phone calls to the mayor, the police commissioner, and the district attorney. "I don't care what meetings you have to cancel," he barked into his secure phone. "Get to that police station now. One of my top security officials has been illegally detained, and heads are going to roll." Back at the station, Agent Sullivan confronted Captain Langley in his office, while Detective Park stood witness to the unfolding drama. "Captain, we need Lydia Monroe released immediately. She's conducting authorized government business, and her detention is a federal matter," Agent Sullivan stated firmly, presenting his credentials. Captain Langley's face went pale as he examined the federal identification. "Agent Sullivan, I've been trying to resolve this situation, but the arresting officer is refusing to listen to reason." "Where is this officer?" Agent Sullivan demanded. "In the booking area, finishing the paperwork," Captain Langley replied, his voice shaking. "But he's been dismissing all attempts at verification, including calls from the governor's office." Agent Sullivan's jaw tightened. "The governor is en route with full security detail. I suggest you get control of your officer before this situation gets worse." In the booking area, Gerald Hawkins was putting the finishing touches on his arrest report. Completely unaware that his career was about to implode, he glanced at Lydia Monroe one more time, savoring what he believed was his moment of triumph. "You know what I think happened here?" Gerald said, leaning against his desk. "I think you were casing that mansion for your criminal friends, probably planning to rob the place when the owners were away. Lucky for the neighborhood, I was there to stop you." Lydia Monroe finally spoke, her voice calm and steady. "Officer Hawkins, you have the right to remain silent. I suggest you exercise it." Gerald laughed harshly. "That's rich, coming from someone in handcuffs. You're the one who should be worried about staying quiet. Everything you say can and will be used against you in court." The sound of sirens began to fill the air outside the station, growing louder by the second. Other officers in the building started moving toward the windows, trying to see what was causing the commotion. The fluorescent lights seemed to flicker with the tension building throughout the building. Captain Langley burst into the booking area, followed by Agent Sullivan and Detective Park. "Gerald, stop what you're doing immediately. We have a federal agent here who needs to speak with you about your arrest." Gerald looked up from his paperwork with annoyance. "Captain, I told you I don't have time for games. I'm processing a legitimate arrest, and I'm not going to be distracted by whatever nonsense this is." Agent Sullivan stepped forward, his imposing presence filling the room. "Officer Hawkins, I'm Agent Sullivan with the governor's security detail. The woman you have in custody is conducting authorized government business. You need to release her immediately." "And I'm the Easter Bunny," Gerald replied sarcastically, not even bothering to look at Agent Sullivan's credentials. "Listen, pal, I don't know what kind of con game you people are running, but I'm not falling for it. This woman is a criminal, and she's going to face the full consequences of the law." The sirens outside reached a crescendo as Governor Pennington's convoy pulled up in front of the police station. Through the windows, officers could see black SUVs with government plates and enough security personnel to handle a presidential visit. The afternoon sun glinted off the vehicle's bulletproof glass as agents took positions around the building. Detective Park grabbed Captain Langley's arm. "Sir, look outside. That's not a prank. Those are real federal vehicles." Captain Langley's face went white as he realized the magnitude of the situation. "Gerald, I'm ordering you to stop processing this arrest immediately. We need to sort this out before it goes any further." But Gerald Hawkins was beyond reason now, his pride and prejudice blinding him to the obvious signs of impending disaster. "No, Captain, I'm not backing down. I know what I saw, and I know who this woman really is. She's a criminal, and I'm not going to let some elaborate scheme change the facts." Outside, Governor Arthur Pennington stepped out of his SUV, his dark suit immaculate despite the urgency of the situation. His security detail formed a protective formation around him as he strode toward the police station's entrance, his face a mask of controlled fury. Agent Sullivan's radio crackled to life. "Agent Sullivan, the governor is entering the building. ETA to your location. 30 seconds. "Copy that," Agent Sullivan replied, never taking his eyes off Gerald Hawkins. "Officer, this is your last chance to do the right thing. In 30 seconds, Governor Pennington is going to walk through that door, and when he does, your career is over, unless you release that woman immediately." Gerald laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Governor Pennington? Right. And I suppose the president is coming too. You people really think I'm stupid, don't you?" The sound of footsteps echoed through the hallway outside the booking area. Multiple sets of dress shoes clicking against the polished floor, in perfect synchronization. The fluorescent lights seemed to buzz with anticipation as the most powerful man in the state approached the scene of Gerald's greatest mistake. Lydia Monroe checked her watch one final time and smiled. Justice was about 30 seconds away. Gerald Hawkins picked up his pen to sign the final line of the arrest paperwork, completely oblivious to the fact that his world was about to come crashing down around him. The sound of approaching footsteps grew louder, but he remained focused on what he believed was his triumph over crime. The booking area door opened. The fluorescent lights of the police station's booking area cast harsh shadows across the linoleum floor as Gerald Hawkins smugly completed the paperwork for what he believed would be his most satisfying arrest of the year. Lydia Monroe sat calmly in the metal chair, her red blazer somehow maintaining its dignity despite the degrading hours she had endured. Her wrists bore the marks from the handcuffs, but her posture remained straight, her eyes focused on something beyond the immediate chaos surrounding her. The sudden screech of tires outside went unnoticed by Gerald Hawkins, who was too absorbed in his own righteousness to pay attention to the commotion beginning to build in the station's front lobby. Detective Michelle Park stood near the coffee machine, her green top wrinkled from stress as she clutched a folder containing information that could save Gerald Hawkins from himself, if only he would listen. The front doors of the station burst open with such force that the security glass rattled in its frame. Governor Arthur Pennington strode through the entrance, his dark suit impeccable despite his obvious urgency. The official governor's pin on his lapel caught the overhead lights as he moved with the controlled fury of a man who had just discovered an unthinkable injustice. Behind him, 3 members of his security detail followed in formation, their muscular frames filling out their tactical gear as they surveyed the station with professional efficiency. Every conversation in the station lobby died instantly. Officers who had been chatting by the water cooler froze mid-sentence. Desk sergeants looked up from their computer screens, their faces reflecting the sudden shift in the station's atmosphere. The governor's presence commanded absolute attention, and the weight of his authority settled over the building like a heavy blanket. "Where is my security chief?" Governor Pennington's voice carried across the station with the unmistakable tone of barely controlled rage. His words echoed off the institutional walls, reaching every corner of the building and causing uniformed officers to exchange worried glances. Gerald Hawkins looked up from his paperwork with annoyance, clearly irritated by the interruption to his booking process. He had no idea who the well-dressed man was, and his arrogance prevented him from recognizing the significance of the moment unfolding before him. "Sir, you need to wait in the lobby area," Gerald Hawkins called out dismissively, not even bothering to stand from his desk. "We're processing a criminal here, and this is official police business." The governor's security detail tensed visibly at Gerald Hawkins's tone, their hands instinctively moving closer to their weapons. The disrespect shown to their principal was unprecedented, and their training screamed warnings about the volatile situation developing in the booking area. Detective Michelle Park dropped her coffee cup, the ceramic shattering on the floor as she realized the catastrophic mistake Gerald Hawkins was about to make. She clutched the folder tighter and started moving toward the booking area, knowing she had to intervene before the situation became irreversible. "Chief Hawkins," she called out desperately, her voice cracking with urgency. "You need to stop what you're doing right now." Gerald Hawkins whirled around to face Detective Park, his face flushed with anger at what he perceived as insubordination. "Detective Park, I've warned you about interfering with my cases. One more word, and you'll be facing disciplinary action." Governor Pennington continued his march through the station, his security detail clearing a path as bewildered officers scrambled to get out of the way. His face showed the cold fury of a man who had built his political career on principles of justice and equality, only to discover those principles being trampled in his own backyard. "I asked you a question," the governor said, his voice now carrying the full weight of his office. "Where is Security Chief Lydia Monroe?" The title hung in the air like an explosive device waiting to detonate. Several officers who had overheard the governor's words began backing away from Gerald Hawkins, suddenly understanding that they were witnessing something far beyond a routine arrest gone wrong. Gerald Hawkins finally looked directly at the approaching man, taking in the expensive suit, the official bearing, and the unmistakable aura of power that surrounded him. For the first time since the arrest began, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his features. "Look, whoever you think you are," Gerald Hawkins said, his voice losing some of its earlier confidence. "You can't just walk into my station and start making demands. I don't care if you're the mayor or the police commissioner." The words seemed to echo in the sudden silence that followed. Governor Pennington stopped walking, his eyes fixed on Gerald Hawkins, with an intensity that made several nearby officers take another step backward. "I'm Governor Arthur Pennington," he said quietly, each word delivered with the precision of a judge pronouncing sentence. "And that woman you have in handcuffs is my personally appointed security chief." The revelation hit the booking area like a physical force. Gerald Hawkins felt his knees go weak as the full magnitude of his error crashed over him like a tsunami. The confident smirk that had been permanently fixed on his face since the arrest began disappeared, replaced by a look of dawning horror. Captain Richard Langley appeared from his office, drawn by the commotion and the unmistakable voice of the state's highest elected official. His orange top and blue jacket were hastily thrown on, suggesting he had been pulled from other duties by the crisis unfolding in his station. "Governor Pennington," Captain Langley said, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Sir, there must be some kind of misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding," the governor replied, his gaze never leaving Gerald Hawkins, "is how my security chief ended up arrested while conducting an authorized security assessment of my safe house residence." Gerald Hawkins opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The reality of his situation was too overwhelming to process. He had spent the entire day convinced of his own righteousness, certain that he was protecting his community from a criminal. Now that certainty lay in ruins around him. Detective Michelle Park seized the moment to step forward, her folder held out like a shield. "Governor, I tried to verify Ms. Monroe's identity, but Chief Hawkins refused to listen to any of my concerns." The detective's words carried the weight of vindication for her own actions while simultaneously sealing Gerald Hawkins's fate. Her green top was damp with nervous perspiration, but her voice remained steady as she finally had the opportunity to present the evidence she had been trying to share for hours. "Release her immediately," Captain Langley ordered, his own career flashing before his eyes as he realized the potential liability his department now faced. "Get those handcuffs off Security Chief Monroe right now." Gerald Hawkins stood frozen, his hands shaking as the full scope of his professional destruction became clear. The woman he had arrested, berated, and humiliated for hours was not only innocent but held one of the most important security positions in the state government. Governor Pennington approached Lydia Monroe, his expression softening as he took in the dignity she had maintained despite her ordeal. "Chief Monroe, I apologize for what you've endured today. Your security assessment was critical, and this treatment is absolutely unacceptable." For the first time since her arrest, Lydia Monroe spoke, her voice calm and professional despite everything she had experienced. "Governor, I was conducting the standard threat evaluation you requested after we received intelligence about potential risks to your residence. I had just completed my external perimeter assessment and was beginning the interior inspection when Chief Hawkins arrived." Her words carried no trace of anger or bitterness, only the measured tone of a security professional reporting facts. The contrast between her composure and Gerald Hawkins's obvious distress was stark, highlighting just how completely he had misjudged both the situation and the woman he had arrested. "The keys I was using," Lydia Monroe continued as the handcuffs were finally removed from her wrists, "were provided by your security office this morning, along with the authorization codes and detailed floor plans necessary for a comprehensive assessment." Gerald Hawkins watched in horror as his entire narrative collapsed. Every assumption he had made, every justification he had offered, every racist stereotype he had relied upon, was being systematically destroyed by the simple presentation of facts. Reporter Natalie Cruz had somehow gained access to the booking area, her camera crew capturing every moment of Gerald Hawkins' public humiliation. The live broadcast was already spreading across social media, ensuring that his disgrace would be witnessed by thousands of viewers in real time. "Chief Hawkins," the reporter called out, her microphone extended toward the disgraced officer. "Do you have any comment on your arrest of Governor Pennington's security chief?" Gerald Hawkins could only stare at the camera, his mouth moving silently as he struggled to find words that might somehow salvage his career. But there were no words that could undo what had been done, no explanation that could justify what had transpired. Detective Michelle Park stepped forward, opening her folder to reveal the documentation that could have prevented the entire incident. "Governor, I have Chief Monroe's official credentials here, along with the work order for today's security assessment. I tried repeatedly to bring this information to Chief Hawkins's attention." The detective's vindication was complete, her professionalism standing in sharp contrast to Gerald Hawkins's prejudicial incompetence. Her green top and blue jacket suddenly seemed like a uniform of honor compared to Gerald Hawkins's now tarnished police uniform. Governor Pennington examined the documents briefly before nodding to Detective Park. "Your diligence is noted, Detective. It's unfortunate that not everyone in this department shares your commitment to proper procedure." The governor's words carried the clear implication that changes would be coming to the police department. Changes that would likely begin with Gerald Hawkins' immediate removal from any position of authority. Lydia Monroe rubbed her wrists where the handcuffs had left their marks, but her expression remained professional. "Governor, despite today's delays, I should be able to complete the security assessment by tomorrow morning. The external evaluation revealed several concerns that need to be addressed." Her focus on completing her professional duties, even after hours of degrading treatment, highlighted the stark contrast between her character and Gerald Hawkins's prejudicial assumptions about who she was and what she represented. Captain Langley approached Gerald Hawkins, his face grim with the knowledge that his department was facing a public relations nightmare of epic proportions. "Chief Hawkins, you're suspended immediately pending a full investigation into your conduct." The words hit Gerald Hawkins like physical blows. Everything he had worked for, everything he thought he represented, was crumbling around him in full view of cameras, colleagues, and the state's governor. The booking area that had been filled with Gerald Hawkins's confident pronouncements hours earlier was now silent except for the quiet click of reporter Natalie Cruz's camera and the low murmur of officers discussing the unprecedented situation they had just witnessed. Governor Pennington turned to address the gathered officers, his voice carrying the authority of his office and the weight of his disappointment. "This incident will be thoroughly investigated, and appropriate actions will be taken to ensure it never happens again." Gerald Hawkins stood alone in the center of the booking area, his career destroyed, his reputation in ruins, and his prejudicial worldview exposed for all to see. The woman he had arrested with such confidence now stood vindicated, her true position and authority undeniable. The revelation was complete, but Gerald Hawkins' reckoning had only just begun. The fluorescent lights in Captain Richard Langley's office cast harsh shadows across his weathered face as he slammed Gerald Hawkins's badge and service weapon onto his desk. The morning sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the dust particles that seemed to hang in the air like Gerald's shattered career prospects. Effective immediately. You are suspended without pay, pending a full internal investigation, Captain Langley declared, his orange polo shirt and blue jacket making him look more authoritative than usual. What you did yesterday wasn't just wrong, Gerald. It was catastrophic. Gerald Hawkins sat slumped in the chair opposite the desk, his usually pristine long-sleeved uniform now wrinkled and stained with coffee from a sleepless night. His face had aged years in mere hours, the confident swagger replaced by hollow-eyed disbelief.
Captain, you don't understand. I was protecting the community. She was suspicious, and
She was the governor's security chief, conducting an official assessment. Captain Langley's voice thundered through the office. Do you comprehend what you've done? You arrested the person responsible for protecting the most powerful man in the state? Outside the office, Detective Michelle Park stood near the water cooler in her green blouse and blue jacket, fielding congratulatory calls from colleagues, praising her attempts to prevent the disaster. Her phone buzzed constantly with interview requests from news outlets, wanting to understand how she recognized the signs that Gerald had missed. Detective Park showed exemplary judgment and professional integrity, Captain Langley continued, raising his voice so she could hear through the thin walls. While you were busy making assumptions based on skin color, she was doing actual police work. The viral video that Darnell Washington had captured now had over 3 million views across various social media platforms. News outlets had picked up the story, with reporter Natalie Cruz's investigative piece trending nationally. The footage showed everything: Lydia Monroe's calm demeanor, Gerald's aggressive escalation, and most damaging of all, his racist commentary during the transport to the station. Attorney Felicia Drummond had wasted no time filing a comprehensive federal lawsuit alleging civil rights violations, excessive force, false imprisonment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Her red power suit had become a fixture outside the courthouse as she held impromptu press conferences, systematically dismantling Gerald's actions with legal precision. My client, Ms. Monroe, conducted herself with remarkable dignity throughout this ordeal, Attorney Drummond had declared to the assembled media. She maintained her composure while being subjected to treatment that would have broken lesser individuals. This case represents everything wrong with discriminatory policing practices. The governor's press conference had been equally devastating. Governor Arthur Pennington stood behind the podium at the state capitol, his dark suit and official pin lending gravity to every word. The natural daylight flooding through the building's skylights created perfect conditions for the cameras as he delivered his statement. Lydia Monroe represents the finest qualities of law enforcement and public service, the governor had announced. Her professionalism, competence, and dedication to duty are exactly why I personally selected her for this crucial position. The treatment she received is antithetical to everything we stand for as a society. The governor's zero-tolerance policy announcement had sent shockwaves through law enforcement agencies statewide. New protocols for bias training, accountability measures, and community oversight were being fast-tracked through the legislature. Back at the police station, Captain Langley pulled out a thick folder containing Gerald's personnel file. Internal Affairs has been busy, Gerald. They've identified 17 cases over the past 5 years where your arrests of minorities in upscale neighborhoods followed similar patterns. Gerald's face went pale as the implications sank in. Each of those cases would now be scrutinized, reopened, and potentially overturned. Civil rights organizations were already organizing legal challenges, and the district attorney's office had announced a comprehensive review of Gerald's entire arrest record. The community reaction had been swift and decisive. Mrs. Constance Hargrove, who had praised Gerald's actions just 24 hours earlier, now found herself the target of intense social media criticism. Her red dress and pearl necklaces had been captured in multiple photos as she encouraged the arrest, and those images now circulated widely as examples of complicit racism. I thought I was helping, Mrs. Hargrove had told reporter Natalie Cruz in a tearful interview outside her mansion. I see now that my assumptions were wrong and harmful. I need to do better. Meanwhile, Darnell Washington had become a local hero. His decision to film the encounter had provided crucial evidence that might otherwise have been Gerald's word against Lydia's. Community groups were praising his courage, and civil rights organizations had invited him to speak about the importance of citizen journalism in documenting police misconduct. "I knew something wasn't right," Darnell had explained to reporters, his voice steady and clear. Miss Monroe wasn't acting like someone who had done something wrong. She was calm, professional, trying to explain, but Chief Hawkins wasn't listening to anything she said. The dashcam footage from Gerald's patrol car had been particularly damaging. His racist commentary during the transport to the station had been captured in crystal clear audio, providing undeniable evidence of his bias and unprofessional conduct. Legal experts predicted that this evidence alone would be sufficient for federal prosecution. Detective Michelle Park knocked on Captain Langley's office door, holding a stack of documents. "Sir, the FBI wants to interview Detective Hawkins about potential federal civil rights violations. They've requested all our files." Gerald's hands trembled as he processed this information. Federal charges carried serious prison time and would destroy any hope of working in law enforcement again. His pension, his reputation, his future, all of it was crumbling because of his prejudiced assumptions about a black woman standing outside a mansion. This is what happens when personal bias overrides professional judgment. Captain Langley continued, his tone now more instructional than angry. "You had every opportunity to verify Ms. Monroe's identity, to listen to her explanations, to follow proper procedures. Instead, you chose to see what your prejudices wanted you to see." The investigation had revealed Gerald's pattern of targeting minority residents in affluent neighborhoods, often on pretexts as flimsy as looking suspicious or not belonging. Civil rights attorneys were already connecting with his previous victims, building a class action lawsuit that would likely cost the city millions in settlements. Lydia Monroe, meanwhile, had returned to her duties with remarkable grace. Governor Pennington's security detail had received numerous commendations for their professionalism during the crisis, but Lydia had deflected all praise back to her team. She focused on the work, implementing the security improvements she had been assessing when Gerald arrested her. Ms. Monroe's conduct throughout this ordeal has been exemplary, the governor had noted in his statement. She maintained her dignity, followed proper procedures even while being mistreated, and returned to her duties without complaint. She embodies the highest standards of public service. The national media attention had sparked broader conversations about police accountability and institutional racism. Cable news programs featured panel discussions analyzing the incident, while social media campaigns demanding police reform gained momentum. Lydia Monroe's story had become a symbol of dignity in the face of injustice. Captain Langley closed Gerald's personnel file with finality. "Your actions have embarrassed this department, violated Ms. Monroe's civil rights, and damaged community trust that will take years to rebuild. The FBI investigation will proceed independently, but from our perspective, your career in law enforcement is over." Gerald tried one final appeal. "Captain, I've served this community for 15 years. Doesn't that count for something? You've spent 15 years serving your own prejudices." Captain Langley replied coldly, "Real community service requires treating all citizens with equal dignity and respect. Yesterday proved you're incapable of that basic requirement." Detective Michelle Park received official notification of her commendation and recommendation for promotion to sergeant. Her attempts to prevent the incident, despite pressure from her superior, had demonstrated exactly the kind of courage and integrity the department needed to rebuild its reputation. The fallout continued rippling through the community. Property values in the upscale neighborhood where the arrest occurred had actually increased as the area gained positive attention for residents like Darnell Washington, who stood up for justice. The mansion that had been the site of Gerald's downfall was now properly secured under Lydia Monroe's professional oversight. Attorney Felicia Drummond had expanded her legal action to include systemic reforms, working with civil rights organizations to ensure the incident would catalyze meaningful change rather than just individual punishment. Her red blazer had become as recognizable as her legal arguments in demanding comprehensive police accountability measures. As Gerald Hawkins cleared out his desk under supervision, He passed the bulletin board where Lydia Monroe's commendation from the governor was prominently displayed. Her professional photograph showed the same calm confidence he had misinterpreted as suspicious behavior, the same dignity he had tried to break with handcuffs and humiliation. The transformation was complete. Gerald Hawkins, once the confident police chief who thought he could judge people by their appearance, now faced federal prosecution and social disgrace. Lydia Monroe, the woman he had tried to diminish, stood elevated as a symbol of grace under pressure and professional excellence. The fluorescent lights continued humming overhead as Gerald walked out of the police station for the final time, his career destroyed by the very prejudices he had been too arrogant to examine. Justice was no longer coming. It had arrived, systematic and thorough, transforming both individual lives and community consciousness in its wake. The story had become bigger than any single incident, sparking nationwide conversations about dignity, justice, and the price of prejudice that would continue long after Gerald Hawkins faded into deserved obscurity. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the federal courthouse, casting long rectangles of light across the polished marble floors. 6 months had passed since that fateful afternoon at the governor's mansion, and today would bring the final chapter to a story that had captivated the nation and sparked conversations about justice, dignity, and the courage to stand against prejudice. In courtroom 4B, every seat was occupied. The overhead fluorescent lights illuminated faces filled with anticipation, hope, and the quiet satisfaction that comes when truth finally has its day. Darnell Washington sat in the third row, his hands folded calmly in his lap, wearing a crisp green shirt and blue jacket. The man whose quick thinking and brave decision to record that afternoon had become a catalyst for change looked remarkably serene for someone who had helped topple a corrupt system. Behind him, Mrs. Constance Hargrove sat with her head slightly bowed, her red dress a stark reminder of that day when she had cheered Gerald Hawkins' racist assumptions. The months since had been a journey of painful self-reflection for the elderly woman, who now volunteered at the local community center's diversity education program, determined to atone for her role in perpetuating the very prejudices that had led to this courtroom. At the prosecutor's table, Attorney Felicia Drummond arranged her files with practiced precision. Her red blazer caught the light as she reviewed her closing arguments one final time. The evidence was overwhelming, the case ironclad, but she knew that beyond the legal victory lay something far more important: the restoration of dignity and the promise of systemic change. The defendant's table told a different story entirely. Gerald Hawkins sat slumped in an ill-fitting gray suit, his former authority reduced to the nervous fidgeting of a man who had gambled everything on his prejudices and lost spectacularly. Gone was the swagger, the arrogant certainty that had defined his approach to policing. In its place sat a broken man facing the consequences of a lifetime of racist assumptions and abuse of power. When the bailiff announced Judge Edward Holloway's entrance, the courtroom rose as one. The judge, wearing his traditional black robes, carried himself with the gravitas befitting a man about to deliver justice in a case that had become a symbol of institutional racism and its consequences. His years on the bench had shown him many forms of injustice, but few cases had presented such clear evidence of systemic discrimination and abuse of authority. "Be seated," Judge Holloway announced, his voice carrying easily through the hushed courtroom. "We are here today for the sentencing of Gerald Hawkins, who has pleaded guilty to federal civil rights violations, abuse of power under color of law, and deprivation of rights under Section 1980. Before I announce the court's decision, I will hear final statements." Attorney Drummond rose first, her red blazer a beacon of authority as she addressed the court. "Your Honor, this case represents far more than the actions of one corrupt officer. Gerald Hawkins's conduct that day revealed the ugly reality of systemic racism that has plagued law enforcement for generations. His immediate assumption of guilt, based solely on the color of Miss Monroe's skin, his refusal to listen to reason, and his escalation of violence against a peaceful, law-abiding citizen demonstrate the exact prejudices that federal civil rights laws were designed to combat." She gestured toward the gallery, where community members sat listening intently. "The evidence presented in this case shows a pattern of discriminatory enforcement that spanned years. Gerald Hawkins didn't just arrest an innocent woman that day, He revealed a mindset that viewed certain citizens as inherently criminal, regardless of their actions, credentials, or character. The prosecutor's voice grew stronger as she continued. But this case also demonstrates the power of courage and dignity in the face of injustice. Ms. Monroe's composed response to degrading treatment, Mr. Washington's decision to document the truth despite personal risk, and the subsequent investigation that followed show us that change is possible when good people refuse to remain silent. As Drummond returned to her seat, the courtroom's attention shifted to the witness stand, where Lydia Monroe had been called to give her victim impact statement. She walked to the stand with the same calm confidence that had defined her throughout this ordeal, wearing the red blazer and black slacks that had become symbols of dignity under pressure. "Your Honor," Lydia began, her voice clear and steady. "6 months ago, I was simply doing my job. I was conducting a security assessment of a government property, following protocols established to protect our state's highest officials. What happened that day wasn't just an arrest based on false assumptions. It was a fundamental violation of the principles that make our democracy possible." She glanced briefly at Gerald Hawkins, who couldn't meet her eyes. "I don't stand here today seeking vengeance. I stand here seeking assurance that no other citizen will face what I faced, simply because of the color of their skin." Gerald Hawkins's actions that day weren't the result of a momentary lapse in judgment. They were the predictable outcome of years of unchecked prejudice and systemic failures in accountability. The courtroom hung on every word as Lydia continued. "During those hours in handcuffs, I wasn't just Lydia Monroe, security professional. I became every black woman who has been presumed guilty until proven innocent. Every professional whose credentials were dismissed because they didn't fit someone's narrow expectations. Every citizen whose dignity was stripped away by those sworn to protect and serve." Her voice carried the weight of experience as she concluded. "But I also represent something else. The truth that prejudice cannot ultimately triumph over facts, that dignity cannot be permanently destroyed by hatred, and that justice, however delayed, will find its way. I ask this court not just to sentence Gerald Hawkins, but to send a clear message that civil rights violations will face swift and certain consequences." As Lydia returned to her seat, Detective Michelle Park, now Sergeant Park, wearing her green top and blue jacket, took the stand to testify about the departmental reforms that had followed the incident. "Your Honor, the investigation into Gerald Hawkins's conduct revealed systemic problems that went far beyond one officer's actions. We found patterns of discriminatory enforcement, inadequate training on implicit bias, and a culture that discouraged officers from challenging misconduct." She straightened in her chair as she continued. "But the changes implemented since then have been comprehensive. We've instituted mandatory bias training, created citizen oversight boards, and established clear protocols for challenging superior officers when civil rights violations are suspected. The department that exists today would never allow Gerald Hawkins's conduct to go unchallenged." When all testimony concluded, Judge Holloway leaned forward, his expression grave as he prepared to deliver his decision. The courtroom fell completely silent, the only sound the gentle hum of the overhead lights and the distant traffic outside. "Gerald Hawkins," the judge began, his voice carrying the full weight of federal authority, "your actions on that day in question represent one of the most clear-cut cases of civil rights violations this court has encountered. You arrested an innocent citizen based solely on racial prejudice, fabricated charges to justify your misconduct, and violated every principle of equal justice under law." The judge's words cut through the silence like a blade. "The evidence presented shows that your behavior wasn't aberrant. It was consistent with years of discriminatory policing that went unchecked because of your position of authority. You violated your oath, betrayed the public trust, and inflicted trauma on a citizen whose only crime was performing her professional duties while black." Gerald Hawkins's shoulders sagged as Judge Holloway continued. "The court sentences you to 18 months in federal prison, followed by 2 years of supervised probation. You are permanently barred from employment in any law enforcement capacity, and you will pay full restitution for legal fees and damages incurred by Miss Monroe." The gavel's sharp crack seemed to echo through the courthouse and beyond, marking not just the end of Gerald Hawkins' career, but the beginning of a new chapter in the community's relationship with justice and accountability. Outside the courthouse, Reporter Natalie Cruz conducted interviews with the key figures who had transformed a moment of injustice into a catalyst for change. Darnell Washington, humble despite his heroic role, spoke about the importance of documenting truth. "I just did what anyone should do when they see injustice happening. We can't stay silent when our neighbors are being treated unfairly." Mrs. Constance Hargrove, her transformation complete, spoke tearfully about her journey from prejudice to understanding. "I was wrong, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to learn better and do better. This whole experience taught me that my assumptions were not just harmful, they were completely contrary to the values I thought I believed in." The story's final scene took place 3 weeks later at the state capitol, where Governor Arthur Pennington was scheduled to deliver a major policy address on criminal justice reform. The morning sun illuminated the steps of the Capitol building as crowds gathered for the historic speech, unaware of the security preparations that had taken months to perfect. In the Security Command Center, Lydia Monroe coordinated protection details with calm efficiency, her red blazer and black slacks now symbols of professional excellence rather than victimization. Multiple screens showed every angle of the Capitol grounds, while radio chatter confirmed that all security protocols were in place. "All teams, sound off." Lydia spoke into her headset, receiving confirmations from snipers, plainclothes officers, and perimeter guards. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was now successfully performing the exact duties she had been arrested for preparing to undertake 6 months earlier. As Governor Pennington took the podium to announce sweeping police reforms inspired by her case, Lydia watched from her command position, knowing that her professional vindication was complete. The woman who had been handcuffed and humiliated for doing her job was now protecting the state's highest official, while he announced changes that would prevent future Gerald Hawkins from destroying innocent lives. The transformation was complete. Justice hadn't just been served in a courtroom. It had been institutionalized in policy, embedded in training programs, and most importantly, written into the hearts and minds of a community that had learned to see beyond prejudice, to recognize the dignity inherent in every citizen. Gerald Hawkins began serving his sentence that very week, his fall from authority to inmate serving as a stark reminder that no one is above the law when it comes to civil rights violations. Meanwhile, Lydia Monroe continued her distinguished service, her reputation not just restored but enhanced by her grace under pressure and commitment to justice over vengeance. The story that began with handcuffs and humiliation ended with handshakes and honor, proving once again that while prejudice may have its day, truth and dignity ultimately triumph when good people refuse to remain silent in the face of injustice. You just heard a story that history tried to overlook. If it stayed with you, take a second to stand with it. Subscribe, share, and help us keep telling the stories that deserve light, not silence.